Hello everyone, our topic today was requested by Nico Azure. We'll be going over Ky from the Guilty Gear franchise. Spoilers for all things Guilty Gear.
Okay, so Ky Kiske is essentially the secondary protagonist of the Guilty Gear franchise. Not quite the main character, but far more main cast than everyone else. The term for this kind of character is apparently deuterotagonist for those curious. He is the protagonist's, Soul bad guy's, longtime rival and frenemy. Ky is the Vegeta to Soul's Kakarot, the Sasuke to his Naruto, the Ken to Soul's Ryu. Like Soul, Ky is a tremendously powerful warrior. Unlike Soul, Ky is a normal human right up until the last few games. He's about 23 when the franchise starts, and in his early 30s as of the newest game. Ky is a gifted swordsman and warrior, called a prodigy in his early youth for his absolutely unequaled skills on the battlefield. These skills and talents extend to the use of magic. Ky favors lightning magic, notable in-universe for being one of the most difficult elemental forms to master. But he is proficient in nearly all other forms of combat magic as well. In battle, he wields the Thunder Seal, a blade that enhances the user's lightning magic, forged by Soul decades before Ky was born. He is also a man of honor, integrity, and faith. Ky believes that in war there are no rules. He fights to win, to survive, to slay his enemy. But in any other form of combat, duels, sparring, tournaments, etc., there are rules of conduct, matters of honor, and that it would be uncouth to break them. His faith in goodness and justice is rigid when the games begin, gradually being both challenged and broadened as the story progresses. Through it all, though, he always strives to do what he believes to be right. And though he loses direction or has his world rocked and shaken over the course of the franchise, Ky is always a dependable friend and a trustworthy ally.
For more information on the world of the Guilty Gear verse, see our video on Soul here, but for our purposes today, all that you need to know about the world setup is this. The games take place on a near-future Earth where magic has replaced technology, but still serves similar purposes, providing heat and lighting to homes, running cars, etc., as well as letting you do things more classically magical like throw lightning or teleport. By the time of the games, the world has suffered through a 100-year-long war known as the Crusades, which ended only about 5 years before the games begin, and that fact quietly hovers over the plot from beginning to end. The Crusades were a war between humanity and a magically created race of bioweapons called Gears, led by a Gear named Justice. One of only a handful of Gears with will and personality of her own, as most Gears were left almost mindless and inert without direction. Ky's story begins near the end of the Crusades. He was born in 2157, and by the age of 5, he'd been orphaned by the war. Humanity's champions of the Crusades were an organization with the oh-so-humble title of the Sacred Order of Holy Knights. And at 5 years old, the young Ky met their leader and asked to join them in their fight against the Gears. Apparently, this particular order of knights doesn't believe in training squires or something, because the Knight Commander told Ky to leave them, and if he survived the next 5 years, he would personally welcome Ky into the Order with open arms, instead of, training him.
So, Ky just did that, returning to the Order at the ripe old age of 10, and properly joining their ranks. By the age of 15, Ky was recognized as a prodigy in the art of war and made a captain, granting him command of an entire battalion of his fellow knights, among them Soul, who also joined the Knights near the end of the Crusades. Ky was a source of awe and inspiration to his fellow knights. Even Soul, who was functionally immortal, feared Ky's skills, which, in addition to the fact that the two men are virtually polar opposites of each other, helped start their rivalry and frenemy relationship. Ky made a habit of dueling his fellow knights, both as a test of skills and as a way to get to know each other and build camaraderie. However, his hatred for Gears was well known. He believed Gears to be wholly evil and irredeemable. Soul, though he kept this fact secret, was a Gear, so when Ky challenged Soul to a duel one day, Soul accepted, but panicked, believing that Ky had discovered Soul was a Gear and intended to use the duel as an excuse to kill him. As a result, Soul went all out against Ky, beating him soundly, because Ky did not in fact know the truth about Soul, and treated the fight as a regular duel between soldiers, no dirty tricks or full-on war tactics, just a test of skill. Soul, however, took Ky's holding back as a slight and held a grudge for years to come. The two would duel numerous times in the following years, always with the same result, Ky holding back and Soul winning the fight. with the exception of their final duel, in which Ky haymakered Sol with a blast of lightning, knowing he could take it after Sol riled him up by insulting his wife. Back to the Crusades, though, Ky and Sol, despite their increasingly tense relationship, begrudgingly worked together to end the war. Ky had recently been appointed Knight Commander of the entire Order, only 16 at this point, and after Sol defeated Justice in battle, Ky and the other Knights worked together to seal Justice in a magical prison, since, like Sol, she was virtually unkillable.
With Justice defeated, most Gears were rendered inert, and the few inherently sapient Gears fled into hiding, ending the Crusades. Within a year, the Knights were dissolved as an order, and Ky joined the International Police Force, quickly rising to the rank of captain, and he would spend the next few years traveling the world keeping the peace. 5 years after the Crusades ended, the first Guilty Gear game starts. A huge tournament, great on promised rewards for the victor and slight on rules or penalties for injuring fellow combatants, was announced. Unbeknownst to the general public, an intelligent Gear had organized the entire thing, planning to use the bloodshed of the tournament to weaken the seal on Justice and free her from imprisonment. Sensing something suspicious, Ky entered the tournament in order to investigate. As a series made of predominantly fighting games, the earlier games are less clear on canon. For example, it's generally accepted that in this first game, Sol ultimately defeated Justice when she was successfully summoned thanks to the carnage of the tournament. However, each character in the game has their own story mode, ending in a fight with Justice, Ky included. In Ky's ending, he manages to kill Justice, and as her life fades, the two have a philosophical debate that shakes Ky to his very core. He proclaims that Gears are evil and that evil must be expunged from the world, that his enemy, despite her name, wasn't Justice, but that Justice was order, that which was ordained by God. Justice counters this idea by laying out the fact that she was created as both a slave and a weapon, designed only to kill and feared even by her creators. So, she fulfilled her role. She killed, she waged war, she united her fellow Gears, her people, against those who would see them used and discarded for being exactly what they were designed to be, because that was justice. She then died before Ky could make a counterpoint, leaving him to consider the disturbing implications of the arguments he couldn't entirely dismiss.
It can be assumed that even if Sol is the one who killed Justice, perhaps Ky aided in the fight, because he clearly enters the second Guilty Gear game dealing with the philosophical ramifications of a conversation like the one he had with Justice in his ending during the first game. The second game takes place a year later, and word reaches Ky's ear of sightings of an intelligent Gear, a concept that sent most of those who heard the news into a panicked frenzy, as most people were unaware of the existence of intelligent Gears outside of Justice, leading to a growing fear that this new Gear could be another Justice, rallying and organizing the Gears for a second Crusade. Understandably, Ky pursued these rumors, eventually coming face to face with the source of the rumors, Dizzy, the half-Gear daughter of Justice herself. It's a testament to the effects of Justice's words on Ky's mind that instead of trying to destroy Dizzy immediately, the two talked first. Dizzy had no interest in conquest. She was a borderline pacifist, but she was a Gear and possessed tremendous, only partially controlled power. Humanity feared her, which led her to fear them and the harm she could cause them, even against her will, which was one of the many reasons she hid in the woods in the middle of nowhere. The two battled, with Ky allowing Dizzy to beat him in an attempt to show her that it was possible to be among humanity without crushing them, before they quickly parted ways as a mob had arrived to try and kill Dizzy. Some damage was done, though, because the mob saw Ky lose, and when word spread that this Gear could defeat the legendary Ky, a truly enormous bounty was placed on her head, leading her to deal with hordes of bounty hunters and eventually Sol himself, who made a living as a bounty hunter. But like Ky, Sol allowed her to go free once he got to know her a little. Dizzy eventually left her forested exile and for a while joined the ranks of a noble sky pirate crew.
Ky would continue on a series of adventures and investigations while working for the International Police Force over the next few years, until eventually he and Dizzy met up again and he agreed to help her learn more about her origins while she continued to learn to live with people. By this point, Ky had become the police chief and Dizzy moved into his home, which eventually led to a relationship and a shared declaration of love. Considering Dizzy's status as a Gear and having no legal standing to speak of outside of that, they couldn't officially, legally wed, but Ky proposed anyway and the two lived and loved together as couples do, eventually leading to the birth of their son, Sin. Sin, being part gear like his mother, grew and developed quickly, such that before he was even a year old, he was the physical and mental equivalent of a child about 4 or so years old. And although Dizzy understood, between Ky's work as the police chief and his guilt over having to keep his family safe, protected, and hidden, Ky didn't make the best impression as a father on his young but quickly developing son. He was gone as often as not, and more distant than he should have been when he was home, which put a strain on their relationship. Things took a turn for the worse when Ky found himself summoned by essentially the GG vs. Illuminati, who attempted to blackmail him into becoming the next king of Illyria and act as their puppet. He obviously immediately refused, but the Illuminati's response was to inform him that if Ky didn't play ball, they couldn't be responsible for what happened to his wife and son. The wife and son no one was supposed to know about. Caught between a rock and a hard place, Ky fell into a sullen funk as he considered his options. Knowing their history, Dizzy called Sol to see if he could help her husband, with Sol agreeing to lend a hand in the form of a duel, which actually did start to bring some light back into Ky's eyes. The duel was cut short when Sin called for Sol to stop since Ky was losing, and with Ky and Dizzy asking Sol to take their son with him, since they knew he'd be safe from the Illuminati in Sol's care. Sol agreed and did a great job of raising Sin as a fellow bounty hunter, and a terrible job of raising him in the more traditional sense.
A few years passed, and Ky, who was doing his best to be an actual, decent ruler, found his kingdom under attack. A being known as the Universal Will, who desired the annihilation of humanity so that it could start creating true humanity, needed a body to unleash its full potential. It saw the gear Justice's body as the perfect vessel, but needed to revive and fix it to make that work. So, to that end, it created a handful of related human form constructs that, when fused with Justice's body, would fix it and give the Universal Will control of Justice's body. The Will then sent its constructs out on a number of missions to secure its goals. One such goal was gaining entrance to a magical structure that, theoretically, gave anyone inside the power to rewrite reality, which would let the Will move forward with its plans regardless of having Justice's body or not. It turned out the keys to this magical structure, though, lie in magical seeds implanted in both Sol and Justice. Seeds whose magical essence had been passed down to both Justice's daughter Dizzy, Ky's wife, as well as his son, Sin. So, one of the Will constructs launched an attack on Ky's kingdom to secure Dizzy for their use. In order to keep her safe, Ky wrapped Dizzy in a barrier and called Sol and Sin home for help. When they arrived, they found that Ky couldn't lower the barrier, and so they had to go and get help in safely releasing Dizzy while still needing to fight off the construct's forces and protect the kingdom. Sin, whose opinion of his father hadn't changed since being taken in by Sol, looked on the situation and couldn't help but think that Ky was useless as both a husband and a king, and stormed off in a huff, only to be captured by the Will's construct, who extracted the essence needed to enter the reality rewriting structure before brainwashing Sin to fight Ky, Sol, and their allies. Sin is freed from the construct's control, and then he and Sol launch an attack on the construct, while Ky leads his forces in combating all of the construct's forces, ultimately culminating in the death of the construct at Sol's hands, the closing forever of the entrance to the reality warping structure, and the freeing of Dizzy from her imprisonment, which leads to a happy reunion between father, mother, and son.
Later, Ky and company are approached by another one of the Will's constructs, Elfet, who, unbeknownst to everyone, herself included, was designed as a sleeper agent specifically to infiltrate their ranks. Elfet warns them of the plans of her sister, another construct named Ramlethal. Wary but interested, Ky takes Elfet into custody, keeping her on his flagship, since he's more certain he can protect her there without intervention from the Illuminati than in most other places. A short time passes and all of Elfet's warnings come to pass. Ramlethal declares war on the world, and Ky enlists the help of Sol and their other allies in stopping her. There are a few bumps along the road, but Ramlethal is defeated, only to have Elfet reveal her hand as a sleeper agent, briefly bonding with Justice's body, before being snapped back to her normal self by Sin, who had become good friends with her during her imprisonment. Before she can do anything with her newly found freedom, however, Elfet and Justice's body are whisked away into parts unknown. Sin would then go on to befriend Ramlethal as well, and she eventually told everyone where to go looking for Justice to stop the Will's plans. One important development during all this action is the first instance we see of Ky awakening some very minor gear powers. Throughout the series, gears are seen to have major regenerative capabilities and often have red glowing eyes. During the fight to capture Ramlethal, Ky took some bullets to the face, but regenerated from the damage, and during this process, one of his eyes glowed red. In the following game, Ky would get a minor super mode reminiscent of Saul's super mode. While Saul's super changed his whole body into a monstrous form, only Ky's left eye, the flesh and hair around it, and his left arm change. While in this mode, Ky's stats gain universal buffs. In the games, there is no direct explanation for his gaining of these powers. We know, from the most recent game, that they are related to Justice's power, meaning it comes either from Dizzy or Sin, her daughter and grandson. And while the immediately obvious and we think far more entertaining explanation is that Ky has slowly gained superpowers from years of fulfilling his husbandly duties, extended materials from the GG verse actually infer that these powers come from Ky's son, Sin. Every image of Sin that we have, including those of him as a young child, show him wearing an eye patch. Some extended materials infer that, in an effort to control his emerging gear powers as a child, one of Sin's eyes was removed. It follows then that when Ky begins manifesting gear powers around a single eye, the reason is because Sin's eye was implanted into his father, thus granting Ky limited, but seemingly growing, gear powers.
Ky, Sol, and the others used Ramlethal's information to track down Elfet, Justice's body, and the Will, defeating the Will's current host and working to shut down the problem of Justice's body, only to be interrupted by a problem. Ky's kingdom was 1/3 of a triumvirate of interrelated kingdoms, each of which was aware of all of these shenanigans involving Justice's body. One of the other kingdoms, unwilling to risk Justice awakening once more, brought ships and attempted to glass the entire region. Despite Ky trying to win his fellow king over by proclaiming he'd stand by Sol's side, certain that his old friend would succeed in fixing the problem, Ky was forcibly teleported out of the blast zone while the other king fired on Sol, Justice's body, and a few others. Thankfully, everything worked out, with the Will's host spending most of its remaining power to protect the area in a surprise twist, giving Sol and their allies time to fuse Justice's body with another friendly construct, removing the Justice problem from play forever. In the following weeks, the Will's host was imprisoned, Elfet and Ramlethal moved in with Ky, Dizzy, and Sin, who were dealing with a revelation made shortly before the previous battle that Sol was Dizzy's father, making him Ky's father-in-law. But their peace didn't last long, as a time-traveling witch broke into the prison holding the Will's host, freeing another entity the Will had trapped inside of itself. The witch and the entity then conspired to draw Sol and many of their allies together so that they could take some magic glue from a friend of theirs and combine into one being. A great battle ensued, and Ky, handling numerous other pieces of business, arrived about halfway through the event in time to see the witch and the entity merge into a godlike being with plans that would end in the destruction of reality. Ultimately, it came down to several of their allies battling the god, Ky in the lead, while Sol powered a super weapon of his own design that they used to fully kill the god. All reality saved, everyone went home, and Ky and Dizzy are finally given a chance to relax with their son and adoptive family, Elfet and Ramlethal. What's more, Dizzy's heroics over the last few games had caused Ky's people to all but fall in love with her, allowing the family to live out in the open with no fear of reprisal.
And that's basically Ky Kiske, king of the Guilty Gear franchise. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave us a like and share it with someone you think might like it. If you have ideas for videos you'd like to see in the future, do like Nico Azure and let us know in the comments down below. If you'd like to see more videos, hit that subscribe button, and if you'd like to see our Let's Plays, follow the link in the description and subscribe to our Let's Play channel.
In the meantime, this has been
True Masters and Morons, signing off.